I would like to spend my closing statement reviewing why we've held impeachment proceedings against Secretary Mayorkas, since my Democrat colleagues still don't seem to get it. Secretary Mayorkas has willfully and systematically refused to follow immigration laws written by Congress. Indeed, he has unilaterally created policies that violate the statutory provisions of the immigration laws related to enforcement. In fact, most courts that have actually heard relevant arguments and decided on the merits agree. The problem is, when the arguments on enforcement went to the Supreme Court in the United States versus Texas, the court refused to decide the matter. The court said it was not subject to judicial review, and they pointed Congress to remedy via impeachment. The court said, if the states can't get relief from the courts, they can get relief from Congress, who can impeach the offending official. Well, now Congress is the proper forum to resolve this dispute. We now have to decide, does the legislation enacted by the people's duly elected representatives mean anything? Or can the secretary just do whatever he wants in direct contradiction to the mandatory language in federal law with impunity? I argue that he cannot continue to not follow the law without consequences. This isn't a policy difference. This is a matter of following the laws written by Congress, and thus a matter of constitutional significance. Today's minority witness recognized back in 2019 that someone could be impeached for a breach of trust. James Madison, the primary architect of the Constitution, was elected to the House of Representatives to serve in the first Congress. At that time, a bill was proposed to create a Department of Foreign Affairs, now the State Department. Concerns were raised that if Congress created such a department, it could be filled by people who abused the public trust. Madison worried about it, and I quote, "the difficulty of displacing those who are unworthy of the public trust," end quote. But he pointed to a solution for that concern. He said on the House floor, and I quote, "if an unworthy man be continued in office by an unworthy president, the House of Representatives can at any time impeach him, and the Senate can remove him whether the president chooses or not," end quote. Now, I don't know about you, but I trust the interpretation of the father of our Constitution more than the interpretation of those desperate to defend the indefensible for political gain. The president has chosen to continue to keep an unworthy man in office, and it is now the duty of the House of Representatives to impeach Secretary Mayorkas and the Senate to remove him from office. The minority witness said we could pass laws to address these issues, but to what end? The secretary has already shown he will not follow the laws passed by Congress. Secretary Mayorkas has consistently and deliberately violated duly enacted laws under the Immigration and Nationality Act that Congress has put into place to protect Americans and guard our nation's sovereignty. Secretary Mayorkas has refused to comply with court orders regarding those very laws in good faith. Additionally, Secretary Mayorkas has on numerous occasions lied or misled the United States Congress and the American people regarding the existence and scale of the border crisis that he created. Secretary Mayorkas told the House Judiciary Committee on April 2022 that he had operational control of the southern border, according to the definition laid out by the Secure Fence Act. By the way, that definition was passed into law by Joe Biden, Barack Obama, and Hillary Clinton. And of course, Secretary Mayorkas' own former Border Patrol chief testified before this committee in March of last year that according to the statute, DHS does not have operational control. Secretary Mayorkas' pure dishonesty was on full display. Again, not a policy issue. To those claiming this impeachment hearing is against the Constitution and against the separation of powers, I'm sorry, that's ridiculous. President Biden and Secretary Mayorkas are the ones who have trampled on the Constitution and the separation of powers by ignoring a co-equal branch of government. As far as I understand the Constitution I swore an oath to at age 17 on the plane at West Point, Congress writes the laws and the executive branch executes those laws. But that is absolutely not what Secretary Mayorkas has been doing when it comes to our country's immigration laws. In fact, he's been spitting on those laws and thus the Constitution in the last 3 years. Impeachment is our final remedy. We're left with no other choice. This is also not a resource issue. Democrats are wrong when they claim that the reason this border crisis is happening is because there aren't enough resources at the border and that Republicans have refused to fund the Border Patrol. First of all, House Republicans have voted substantial increases in funding for CBP above the president's requested amount. In fact, funding the Border Patrol operations and related Southwest border requirements increased $2.2 billion since FY 2021. Additionally, House Republicans, in the FY 24 Homeland Security Appropriations Bill, where we fund the government, increased border security funding again above the president's proposed budget. On top of this, H.R. 2, the Secure Border Act, would fund a Border Patrol force of 22,000. Yet, did any Democrat here vote for that? No. It's the definition of hypocrisy. Secondly, Secretary Mayorkas actually asked for less money each year to fund detention. The one thing that is a deterrent to people coming and making that trek. Third, it won't matter how many resources we have at the border if the policies don't change and follow the laws written by Congress. President Biden's supplemental package would do nothing to secure the border between ports of entry, and it would do nothing to stop the flow of migrants to our border. No, every cent of Biden's supplemental package would go directly toward funding mass catch and release policies. That is a non-starter. That's what's created the crisis in the first place. This is clearly not an issue of funding. DHS had less funding under the Trump administration for border security, yet our border was far more secure. Funding Biden's supplemental package won't fix the crisis at the border. It will fund it. Again, it's not a funding problem. Secretary Mayorkas' complete disregard for the laws passed by Congress have had a devastating impact. That's what we learned today. Everyone knows the numbers. As one Texas sheriff has said, and I quote, "It's quite frankly a tsunami of death that has crashed into the United States over our southern border. It's killing Americans wholesale, and it's just an epic slaughter manufactured by the cartels. If you don't secure the border, it is going to continue," end quote. Slaughter is the right word to describe what fentanyl is doing to our country, to our young people, to many of our sons and daughters. What else do you call 100,000 overdose deaths in 2021? And a comparison was made earlier today between incarceration rates of native citizens and immigrants. Well, whatever that is, it misses the point that every crime committed by anyone who's here illegally is a completely preventable crime. If you shut the border, those lives are saved. To prevent those crimes, you need only enforce the immigration laws on the books, which is exactly what Secretary Mayorkas is willfully not doing. This hearing is titled Voices for the Victims, the heartbreaking reality of the Mayorkas border crisis. Tammy Noble's daughter, Kyla Marie Hamilton, no longer has a voice. Josephine Dunn's daughter, Ashley Marie Dunn, no longer has a voice. That's why we held this hearing today. It is our duty to be the voices of those who can't speak for themselves and to demand accountability on their behalf. And finally, to Secretary Mayorkas, who couldn't be bothered to show up today. Secretary Mayorkas, you have one job: follow the laws and secure the homeland. Yet you allow criminal aliens to walk across our border, to spit in the face of our country's laws, and to exploit vulnerable migrants. Secretary Mayorkas, you have one responsibility: follow the law and secure the homeland. Yet You allow massive amounts of fentanyl to flow across the border and poison tens of thousands of Americans. Secretary Mayorkas, you have one duty to follow the law and secure this homeland, yet you refuse to let our Border Patrol do its job and keep criminal aliens from coming across the border or allow ICE to deport all criminal aliens when caught. You had one job, one responsibility, one duty, and you have refused to fulfill it. Over and over again, you have refused to follow the laws and to secure our homeland, yet you shrink your responsibility. This is utterly disgraceful. Now, I'd like to make a few other points. Someone today has made a point, I can't recall if it was a member or the minority witness, that if you remove the secretary, there'll be no change because they'll just put another guy in there like that. Well, I have a duty to the people of Tennessee and the people of America that if we have a lawless cabinet secretary who refuses to obey the laws written by Congress and who refuses court orders to cease and desist, totally disrespecting the two other equal branches of government in our Constitution, I have a duty under the Constitution to remove him. And it doesn't matter if the devil I don't know is worse than the devil I do. My duty is to remove him, and I will do my duty. There have been some, I think, we'll say disingenuous comments about our efforts to get Mr. Mayorkas here today. We have tried for months and months to get him to come and testify on the border issues. The only time he's come is when he's constitutionally or legally mandated to present the national threats briefing. He came with the director. I was glad he was here for that. He has not worked with me to be here. In fact, today he decided to meet with some Mexican officials who come from Mexico instead of being present at this hearing. That ought to tell you where his priorities are. Now, some people have suggested, of course, that we could pass some more legislation. Well, again, I did say, what's the use if he's not going to abide by it? But you know what? H.R. 2 sits over there on the other side of the building. Well, actually, it's that way. I'm not directionally challenged. It's that way. Amend it. Take the parts you don't like out of it. I think that's the process. And then it comes back over here. We go to conference committee and we work it out. You don't just sit and leave it sitting on a desk and say, you're not writing legislation. Well, yeah, we sent it to you. And the process is you amend it in your committee, vote on that amended version in the Senate, and send it back to conference. So don't sit there and say we haven't done anything. That was months ago. And I have to address the ranking member's suggestion that we would use these young women as political pawns to make a political statement. I am offended by that. His closing remarks could have been made at a political rally. It's despicable to suggest that I would use the two of you as political stunts. I'm trying to show that every American is unsafe right now with these ridiculous border policies. What happened to you ladies and your daughters could happen to any American. And the reason they've happened is because the secretary isn't following the laws passed by this body, both Republicans and Democrats. And if he were a Republican, I'd be saying the exact same thing. Has nothing to do with politics for me. I spent 24 years prepared to give my life for this country. And at times I thought I might have. No, what matters to me is that document that I swore an oath to defend. And this secretary has spit on it by saying that co-equal branches of government don't matter to him. I'm sorry, he's got to go. I thank the witnesses for their valuable testimony and the members for their questions. The members of the subcommittees may have some additional questions for the witnesses, and we would ask that the witnesses respond to those in writing pursuant to Committee Rule 7D. The hearing record will be held open for 10 days. Without objection, the ranking member is